And we're live. Hi, I'm Dazza Greenwood, a scientist at the MIT Media Lab, coming to you live from Cambridge Innovation Center. Very posh, very innovative. And this is a prep video for the Open Music Legal Hackathon at the MIT Media Lab this weekend. And it's a collaboration very much between the Media Lab and the Open Music Initiative with our friends and colleagues and fellow entrepreneurs at the Berklee College of Music. And I am very, very happy to have George Howard of the Open Music Initiative with us here. And he's been collaborating with me the last few months, prepping the issues and, now and figuring out how to do an open music hackathon and then make a legal dimension on top of it. So we've been, keeping a few plates spinning, and I think by Jove, we've got it. And so George has joined us today to give us to introduce himself, give us a little bit of an overview of what is Open Music Initiative and the goals, and to talk about a learning session that he's going to be doing live at the Media Lab during the hackathon, during our afternoon session. So we can get a preview of that, and you can see if you'd like to join him for that. And maybe if we're lucky and we have time, we can brainstorm a little or hear from George about what could be some, the good types of things to do for hacking projects or even small discussion groups. So with that, thank you for being a collaborator on this event, George, and let's make the most of it.
Well, thank you so much. That was overly kind. You have done the heavy lift here, and we are grateful to you, grateful to MIT and the Media Lab, and grateful for this opportunity. It's a really important time. As a bit of background, yes, as one of the original members of Open Music Initiative, I'm kind of standing in here for my colleague who is the founder of Open Music Initiative, Thomas Panay, and he's a hero of mine on a lot of levels, but he's been able to push this initiative forward at a time when it's just so crucial. And he, Open Music Initiative is a nonprofit. It's a joint effort originally founded by Berklee and MIT, and the goal of it is really to try to create these open source protocols for identification of music and rights holders and creators. And that's a big lot of language, but if I could try to make a little bit more sense in plain English. The music industry is a complicated one, and it's dominantly complicated from a legal perspective because songs, unlike other IP, axiomatically have two copyrights at inception. You have a copyright for a sound recording and a copyright for a composition. And that the failure to match those two. So I'm Dolly Parton, and I write a song called "I Will Always Love You," but then X number of years later, Whitney Houston does a version of it. Two different rights holders there, probably more than that if Dolly has a publisher. Whitney Houston was signed to Arista Records, and contractually, Arista Records is not legally allowed to issue that work without an agreement in place with Dolly, and so in that the rights soup of 19 whatever when the Bodyguard soundtrack came out makes today's rights soup look like it's been accelerated by many orders of magnitude when you weave in things like samples. A typical Beyonce song or Drake song might have 11 or 12 different writers on it. Once things moved from analog to digital, tracking them in my mind should have become easier, but it's become more challenging. And the net of it for me, and some of this is just George speaking, but it's consistent with OMI, is that because we don't have these interoperable databases, we are at minimum not opening up all the possible ways in which musicians and other rights holders might be able to better get their music out there to have impact and profit, etc. And in my personal opinion, if we don't address this, we're just going to see further consolidation around the music industry. The popular artists will just get richer and more powerful. The Spotifys and the major labels will continue to dominate. And at the same time, the Amazons, Apple, Google, all of whom are using music as loss leaders to sell high margin products, will drive the perceived value of music to zero. And it just leaves out a huge swath of creators. And importantly, it also does not facilitate innovation. If you look at something like SoundCloud, which had $1 billion of investment capital into it, and then was sort of sold for $150 million because they couldn't get their rights issues in place, that sends a chilling effect into the marketplace for investment, and incumbents just kind of keep doing what incumbents do. So it's a critical time, and Open Music's whole sort of mission is really to at least explore these things, look at better ways for interoperability. We don't own databases. We won't own anything. We are a coordinating agent. We try to put, and again, I give all credit to Panos, put the right people in the room, and the right people include the big stakeholders now, whether that's a Netflix or Warner or YouTube or all the publishers. But it's also the artists, and it's also the students, and it's also the entrepreneurs who are in adjacent or orthogonal spaces, and try to make everybody come to a place where we don't always see things as sort of adverse, and we don't see these databases as being proprietary in the sense of our only value additive process. One of the problems of the music industry has been all these siloed databases where everybody has a database, they don't talk to each other, and the perceived or real value of those databases being siloed has led to a real lack of sort of innovation and opening of markets. And so we're trying to work through these processes, and we're doing so at a time where, as many people know, the Music Modernization Act was just signed into law. Now this is something that many people feel is a real step forward, and it may very well be. But as part of this law, you have a mandate for new databases, and it's important to remember.
Actually, I just want to use my 3 favorite words from the statute, and it is a legal hackathon, so I think I'm entitled to do some blue book citation later, maybe. Public accessible database.
Yeah, perfect. Public accessible database, and so look, I'm a JD too. So when we talk about, words have meaning, and we all know as lawyers or law students or JDs or whatever that you try for precision, but there's subjectivity, and so public, right? So that would mean, does that mean available, accessible to the public? Or does it mean owned by the public? And so one of the big threads of open music that's galvanized us has been around decentralized databases, and the buzzword of the day, and it comes up maybe more than I'd like, even though I've been a big proponent of this technology from the very early days, is this sort of idea of blockchain-based technology. And one of the key tenets of blockchain is a decentralization element, even though increasingly there are many proprietary blockchain databases. But to your point, public, and open and accessible, those are all abstractions, and there needs to be governing protocols and governance, and who gets to set those standards. And again, we have since our inception attempted to put forth best practices around standards, and so I hope that this hackathon moment can be, from a legal perspective, look at issues around, okay, these 2 rights, from the sound recording and the composition, how can we facilitate transactions between those? Because again, another big piece of blockchain tech is this concept of a smart contract. Now, we as JDs know the contracts have certain elements. There has to be sort of this bargain for exchange, a meeting of the mind. There has to be consideration. There has to be capacity, right? And if you have those elements, and certain contracts require writing, some certain don't. But a smart contract in the blockchain sense is not necessarily a legal contract. It's more a set of if this, then that rules. And maybe the best sort of heuristic around that would be something like Creative Commons, which I think would be a worthwhile thing for people to familiarize themselves with in advance if they're not. Creative Commons is a way to unbundle the 6 exclusive rights that one gets as a copyright creator in exchange, typically for promotion, because that then solves the consideration element at a time when you just can't exchange funds in a scalable way. Let me try to say that better. So Creative Commons is a really beautiful concept. It's been used by 1 billion people or so. And what it does is, I'm an artist and I can say, okay, look, you can now use my work, you can sample it, etc. In exchange for that, you agree to give me credit, and there's your consideration. What one way to look at it, and I've written about this and I'll send you the article, is blockchain that could facilitate a Creative Commons-like effort, but in a machine-readable and thus scalable way. So I could say, I'm a songwriter, and I have this work, and I'm going to ascribe these rules in this work and make them machine readable. And someone on the other side could search for that, and then if the rules are satisfied, it would self-execute via this sort of smart contract. And then importantly, another blockchain component that's very important is immutability. A record put on a blockchain is there. You can't take it down. You can't change it. It doesn't necessarily mean that all the elements of it have to be transparent. However, it does provide an audit trail. And auditability in the music industry has been a bugaboo forever. I mean, I did a talk at Suffolk, and I was there with someone from the copyright office.
University Law School?
Uh-huh.
That's my alma mater, and it's a great place. Coming out strong with technology nowadays. So what did you talk about?
We were talking about, and it's a similar kind of concept. So in Europe, they have something now, a mandate called the digital single market. And this was something that was kicked around or originally put forth in 2015. And it's just so amazing the way times have changed. If you think about 2015, we were still pre-Brexit. We were still let's build walls around things. It was much more, the euro had not begun to sort of have the stress that it does now. And the gesture there was, look, we can create efficiencies if we remove intermediaries. And so the gesture is, let's have a single market in which people can have portable technology. So I can buy or license or gain access to a piece of technology in Germany, whether it's a Netflix movie or whatever. And then I can also have access to that if I go to Sweden, because you can't now, right? And my Netflix account in Germany won't work the same way. Similarly, they put in place a set of standards. Section 13 of the Digital Single Market essentially mirrors our Digital Millennium Copyright Act, right? And the safe harbor provision thereof, which stipulates sort of guidelines around user-generated content. If I'm YouTube, in order for me to stay in compliance with the DMCA, and people are uploading content, I have to have a technological solution to identify infringing works. I then have to be able to give notice, et cetera. And if I don't, I'm now outside of protection, and the lawsuits will come fast and furious. The problems or the issues around this is those types of systems are expensive to build and to maintain, and so therefore they could be seen as favoring the incumbents. And if I'm a startup and I have to build these same systems, that's a budget item I don't have. So there's a lot of back and forth. Tim Berners-Lee is not in favor. Jimmy Wales is not in favor. So these are the types of tensions that we should really be talking about from the broad-based. But many of these things go away, and I'd like to put forth this as maybe a sort of at least a thought experiment as we think about what type of projects to hack during our sort of learning session. Is that one of the big problems and challenges of the music industry has been it's a system built on blanket licenses, compulsory licenses. So, for instance, if you wanted to record a song that I had written, make a cover version of it, I can't stop you, right? In the United States, I cannot stop you from doing it. And I also have a ceiling, a price ceiling. I cannot charge you more than X for that license, right? And that's to me a very unusual thing, because in what other industry is there a ceiling where I can't say, So, but they did that
in Soviet Russia was one of the features of their kind of command and controlling heights of the economy. But it is an unusual marker for market economy.
Free market economy, you typically wouldn't do that. And so you're making my point, right? I mean, is that the society we want to live in? In any case, but of course, if we were able to contract directly rather than having made a statutory license, then we could set whatever price we wanted. One of the things that I say frequently is we don't know what the fair market value of music is, because there's too many price setting elements done by governmental institutions or quasi-governmental institutions. But we do know that the market price for music currently is unfair, right? And so between that and then, for instance, also like if my music is played on the radio or my music is streamed online, there's no bargain for exchange there. These are either governmental or quasi-governmental, like performance agencies, ASCAP, BMI, or whatever, that are sort of setting the prices on my behalf. And that made sense in an era in which you had to sort of model rather than measure, in the same way that people would come to your house to read your gas meter once every 6 months, and then they would extrapolate that data and price you accordingly. Now we know exactly how much energy you use, and so we went from modeling to measuring. We can do the same thing with music. We could measure our usage in a very exact, but it may not benefit the incumbents to do that. A blockchain-based system in which we could say, hey, look, I'm going to set a price for my work. I'm going to make it searchable through metadata, what have you, and then buyers can find it. And if they buy it enough, supply and demand, I'll raise my price. If they don't, I'll lower the price. And we create markets that way in direct licensing. And that would really obviate all of this. And so I would encourage people to think about the projects that they're doing in that way. Think about, for instance, rights holders. And look, just my bias is the incumbents, the big artists, they're fine. They don't need your help. Anecdotally, Universal Records is making $10,000 a minute just from Spotify. They don't need your help, right? And Drake doesn't need your help. The people that need help right now are the artists that yeah, sure, they have access to the market, but now there's a new set of gatekeepers. Getting on a Spotify playlist is the analog to getting played on a radio station 5 or 10 years, 20 years ago, whatever. So we're kind of, it's like, look at the new boss, same as the old boss. So I'd encourage you to think about creators from the standpoint of, I'm a writer, I'm making works, but my access to the market and my ability to sort of monetize those works and or control them is very, very abstracted and very, very intermediated. And on the other side of the market, say I'm somebody that's interested in creating an application that uses music for health or something. There's no real easy way, and I know this from personal experience, to get that type of license via a Harry Fox or a ASCAP or any of those places. They're not set up that way. And therefore, I can't get the music that I need without risk of lawsuit or incredible expenses. So you have a marketplace that's very inefficient. You have a willing seller, a musician that'd be like, sure, I'd love to have my music used in a health app. And you have a willing buyer. I'm an entrepreneur. I want to use music to treat Alzheimer's. I need music. We should be able to search for this, right? And find a love match and set rules. And it should be able to be done at scale. And we have the technology to do this. And through blockchain-based technology, I'd encourage you to look at current blockchains, our API, other APIs, and build around this. And the legal perspective that you want to look at is, okay, you have these rights and they're not going to change. I would strongly recommend that you familiarize yourself with, Section 17 of the United States Copyright Code and the certain elements that delineate the enumerated rights. If I own a composition, right, I wrote a song, I'm Dolly Parton, I have an exclusive right to distribute, reproduce, create derivatives, display, and publicly perform. In advance of these sessions, you need to know what each of those mean. I've written about it. I'll send links out. On the sound recording side, I'm Arista Records. I have those same exact rights, but there's no exclusive right for public performance. So if a song gets played on the radio, Dolly Parton gets paid, Whitney Houston doesn't get paid. Everywhere else in the world, both get paid because of something called neighboring rights. This is crazy. So look at those rights, figure out how buyers and sellers could more efficiently create use cases for these works outside of traditional things. Outside of, again, we don't need help getting music on Spotify. We don't need help. What we need help is if I want to create my own Spotify. I mean, we shouldn't have 3 dominant streaming services. Everyone should have one, right? I bet I would love to know what music you're listening to. Why is it that you can't make your works, what you're listening to, publicly available? And why can't I subscribe to that? And why can't we create incentives around that? Tokenization is something to look at, right? Tokenization is a concept that's gained traction dominantly because of crypto, but it's not a new concept. It's just gamification using some sort of alternative form. A rewards card is tokenization, right? Why can't we coordinate better so that we're rewarding fans for curating? And then when those curated playlists that a fan makes gets licensed into some restaurant, that fan is rewarded, right? So there's all sorts of interesting things that can be talked about with regards to rights issues, with regards to contract issues, with regards to fiduciary duty, with regards to, and I'd suggest those are the types of things.
So, so on that note, listen to George, everybody, and like seriously think about that. And I'll do my job and extract from his remarks some of the best of, including excerpts from Section 17 and what those enumerated rights are. We put them on the hackathon page. And
DMCA is 512. The DMCA it's the 512, Section 512 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act really lays out the safe harbor provision.
And go to legalhackathon.org. And then if you click on resources, it's a little bit down our event page, you'll see, we've got tutorials that I've made over the last couple of months with a number of blockchain and other technology providers that have some open source that you could use to get started. Endor is one of them that's more analytics, and we've got some nice data on like how many plays, music, art chain coming.
Yeah, so I know those guys.
I just wanted to run through the tools that are there. Our chain and our song, they've just flown some people out. They're here. We've got a demo of how to use that as a way to track rights and to make things available. Here's another tutorial from just last night. Monax presented in New York last weekend, and we've got a tutorial for how to use their new Blackstone open source release and to do a co-writing agreement. If you're working with other musicians, that's the use case that we showed, but you can use it more flexibly. Open Law also has a demo here. It's a consensus node for how to do music licensing in very creative ways. And then finally, the Accord project has smart legal contracts where you can both Open Law and Accord project let you kind of show the legal terms on one side and some of the kind of machine processable automated terms of the smart contract on the other side, and they're template driven. So there's a few tools that you can start with as you're starting to kind of think through how you would actually achieve some of the types of business models and legal frameworks with technology that George just implored you to try. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, George. What were you saying?
Oh, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Those are great tools. So I know the Archain guys very, very well. And who's coming? Is Greg Meredith coming, or who's?
Kayvon is here. Someone named Aura is here, and I think there's one or two other people that are coming for Sunday.
Yeah, that's cool. And they, anyway. So yeah, that's great. So some really, really wonderful tools, and the Archain is essentially, their USP is that it's just much faster transactions, which is a big problem with blockchain, right? Scalability issues. So Ethereum is struggling the way it is right now, just because is a scalable. I think SEC elements too. I don't know how much you're going to get into ICOs and those types of things, but
not too much, I hope. But if so, for those of you that want to explore Archain, I strongly recommend that we'll have people on site that can hack with you. The tutorials are perfectly good if you're another site, and there's a number of them around the world happening this weekend. And in the second video in the Archain section, I took a while. Well, we had the guys here yesterday to actually highlight some of what George was just mentioning. I'm speaking, whatever, through the fourth wall now to you, the audience, not to George. But you should know too, George, we went through the composability of it and the extensibility and how they basically can scale up very quickly using Kubernetes. And so some of these properties are just could be really essential when you look at the deployment of a production scale, music machine.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And it's because, like, like with any new technology, right? It's you got what Clark's law, right? Sufficient technology is indistinguishable from magic, and so we'll know blockchain has adopted when people stop saying blockchain, right? Nobody says TCP/IP. One of the reasons that people say the internet, right? But the reason that blockchain has struggled, and I just did post I should send you this too, because I just posted just a recently Forbes article on the 4 points of failure around blockchain startup elements right now, and it's a two-piece thing, but I can send you the second piece. Maybe I can get it done before Sunday. If it's done, I gotta get it up.
Yeah,
but
one of the learning session. Go on.
Yeah, but one of the issues is that like people are overestimating smart contract technological efficiency right now. It's just not terribly efficient, right? And so if you ask too much of it, and this is really important in the hacks, right? Smart contracts right now are very good at sort of if this then that single sort of deviation type thing. If you start saying, okay, let's do something to solve for samples in which it's not if this then that, it's if this and then this also and then this and it just breaks and it doesn't work. So you have to be very careful about using sort of controlled compositions. Our chain's a good example of kind of Moore's law advancement, right? Right now things are slow, but if you believe in Moore's law generally, and how can you kind of not? In this case, like you know, this isn't going to be a problem forever any more than the speed of the internet wasn't a problem for very long. So that's a really, really good sort of.
Speaking of problems or challenges, you've asserted that you're Dolly Parton at least a couple of times. Identity is one of the issues that comes up.
Yeah.
How do you know? How do we even describe the identity of a musician in a way that's discoverable and unique, and you can address for to contribute to songs and credits, but also to get royalties to? I think that's another sort of eddy of this whole thing, right?
Yeah, it is for sure.
Right, Dolly?
Yeah, and I mean, look, a couple of things. One, there is a sort of immutability quota. There is sort of proof of stake. There are ways in which that we can. I mean, identity is a big bugaboo for the world right now, and so there are ways that we can combine sort of technology as well as sort of reputation scores, right? One thing to be very careful of is blockchain doesn't obviate rule of law. In fact, we could say it's going to put stress on it because it's going to increase transactions, but it does provide sort of an audit trail. And then there are technological solutions in which you can put sort of proof of stake there, and over time you can develop a reputation score in the same way you might as like an Amazon seller or something. But it is an issue for sure because people sort of equate Bitcoin at least with anonymization, and that doesn't necessarily have to be true. I will say to be careful also about metadata, right, which is a sort of maybe a second order issue to what you're talking about. But a lot of people are saying, well, look, the issue that we have to solve is are we matching, Dolly Parton with this, that, or the other thing, the writer and the performer and all of this. And again, if we think about it, like one of the first killer apps for the iPhone was Shazam, and that was 2007. And again, thinking about Moore's law, we know that we have technology that can identify sound recordings very, very well, right? Where things fall apart, both on a content ID session and any other type of identification, is identifying the composition. Mm-hmm. So, but we know that with some sort of combination of AI and machine learning and human intervention, we should be able to catalog and rapidly identify down to the stem level of everything, right, of every song. And at that point, metadata goes out the window. Now it's much more about recognition via, okay, no, I not only know that this was Dolly Parton who wrote this, it was whoever who played bass on it and that type of thing. And you can create incentives to do that, right? I mean, what is Wikipedia but a sort of validation mechanism for people who think they know more about things than others, and then an iterative improvement. And by the way, Wikipedia has an audit trail where you can see change logs through that. So if we were to be able to incent people to say, look, I'm going to provide information about this song, this work, and then over time give them benefit either through tokens or just validation. I mean, nobody's getting paid to be an editor for Wikipedia. I mean, except for a very small group of people, and yet people do it all the time. And over time, you get some notion of truth around that. We could be doing the same thing for musical works, and then through smart contract distributing better, right? So that's an important element to consider. The other thing that I'd ask people to think about is right now the underlying metadata is structured to work such as it is for text-based search, right? So I will type into a search box, I want to hear this song or this whatever. But we both know that text-based search is on the way out, right? I mean, now we're searching with our voices, and we search very differently from our voice in the current with our voice than we do when we're typing something in. And the metadata is not ready for that. And so we're at, to my mind, a precipice moment as people are demanding too much of the metadata because it's structured for search via text, but now we're searching with voice. That ain't gonna work, right? And then that gets you to sort of preference engines. And why are preference engines so bad right now? And algorithms generally, right? Where it's like, I mean, I did an example in class one time where I was talking about, how Spotify is trying to decouple, artists and songwriters or whatever from playlists. They just want people to say, hey, give me, music to cook by or whatever. So I said this, I said, hey, Siri, give me some music to cook by. And it said, okay, this little wheel spun. And then it said, okay, we found something for you, George. Here's the song from the band called Spoon. And Spoon's an Austin, Texas, like indie rock band. It has nothing to do with cooking. But the algorithm saw cooking in a band called Spoon and put two and two together. That's a failure of the algorithm, right? And the problem is, like, we all discover music exactly the same way. our friends tell us about music, right? And algorithms aren't our friends. And also in this society right now, which I think is a really good political time to sort of think about this in the Me Too era, who's dominantly coding these algorithms? Algorithms don't spring fully formed from the earth. Algorithms are coded by humans, and humans have implicit bias, right? Well, who's dominantly the computer scientists and the engineers who are writing these algorithms? It's white males. So now we're tuning algorithms to be informed by our gender and racial biases, however consciously or otherwise, right? And facial recognition. So all of these elements sort of all come together around issues of identity, around issues of search. And those are the types of thought experiments, and those are big, big, hairy, audacious goals and broad things, but have at them, right? They do go to, that's the type of thing that we need to be thinking about in a hack. And I've talked way too much, but so.
Here. Well, that was excellent. And if any of you are interested in following up on that final thread that George mentioned on, in a sense, the ethics and the social implications of algorithmically, based, data-driven, model-based processes in the music context, tap me on the shoulder. There's some very interesting things happening at the lab. So if you're here in person, or you can telegram in if you're at one of the sister locations. We've got the Algorithmic Justice League. We have the Assembly Project. We've got a few, I'd say, pretty pioneering, thoughtful approaches to try to address and balance out or counteract somehow these types of key biases and other unintended consequences that slip into our algorithmic-based decision making. So with that said, I want to just thank you again, George, and thank you, Open Music Initiative, and thank you, Berklee College of Music, for being our collaborators, and looking forward to your learning session on Sunday afternoon. And everybody, come on out, come hack the law with us, and let's see if we can't, take back music for the people.
Oh man, from your lips to God's ears, right on. Thanks, I can't wait. Thank you so much, Daza.